Well, this is Nick Collier again, and I want to wish you a happy Thanksgiving. I'm sitting in my office, and out the back window here is my wife's temple, and hey, we're ready to have ourselves a Thanksgiving. We're going to go down into Sacramento and hang out with Barbara's son and my stepson. Thanksgiving for me was an extravaganza. My mom would put on the dog. She would just go all out. She would make a pile of mashed potatoes and she'd get a 20-pound turkey. And oh man, we just have, there would be cranberry, two or three cranberry sauces. There would be pies galore, ice cream. I mean, it was more than anybody could wish for. She'd spend all day in the kitchen, and it was obvious she was having a great time. The unfortunate part was is my mom wasn't that good of a cook. I mean, her interpretation of a good cabbage was to cook it for an hour or boil it for an hour until it was completely limp and it looked like gush. And she would we'd have spinach right from the can. She thought things from the can were putting on the dog. It was quite an event growing up. I'm the oldest of six kids, and so we had a bunch of screaming kids hanging around, and also the entire neighborhood. I mean, we lived in a neighborhood where everybody had a couple of kids, and it was a pretty great place to grow up. So, but the problem was that Mom never cooked enough food, and so we, hang out, wait for the food. And by the way, there was no snacks. You couldn't have anything before the meal, and we had to stay out of the kitchen because we were always trying to steal a little food out of the pot or whatever it was. And so you got six starving kids waiting for the meal, and finally we sit down, and of course Mom's got to say prayer time. She's a devout Christian. She was to the end of her days. And at the other end of the table was my dad, who was an absolute stonewall atheist. And quite a combination. So, we'd always say prayer time. And my mom would always be the one to say prayer time, except for a few occasions. But she would say prayer time, and she would thank Jesus for this and thank him for that, and wish that the neighbor was going to be well again, and bring in the community, and wanted the community to get along, and would Jesus help her do that, and she make sure and take care of the cats and dogs of the neighborhood, and the little birds that flew in and out of the trees. She would go on and on and on. And here's us kids, we're starving. We just we want food, and we knew there wasn't going to be enough food. And that's, that was one of her shortcomings. She never made enough food. So as soon as prayer time's over, pow, we dive into the food and we start eating, and within 5 or maybe 10 minutes, all the food's gone, and we're still kind of hungry, but the food's gone, but the rule of the house was nobody leaves the table until everybody's done eating. And my dad, being who he was, ate very slowly, extra slowly, I think, just out of spite. But, I'm not sure of that. Very slowly. And he would take a bite and chew it and then talk about something to one of the kids or my mom, and then, take another bite. And, there was always a couple of extra kids at the dinner table because my folks were very generous. They bring in whoever they ran into. I mean, oftentimes, and in those days, there weren't that many homeless people. My dad would bring home a homeless guy that he saw on the side of the road, bring him in and feed him, and then take him to where he was going. It was wonderful, actually. I really appreciated it. We got a dinner with food that we didn't, that wasn't that good. But at the time, I didn't know, it was all I knew. I thought the food was great. And it wasn't until I actually moved to Nevada City in my 20s and started eating food that other people cooked, and the people who really knew how to cook, that I realized how bad my mom's food was. But, hey, I loved her. She was great. She was an amazing storyteller. She had so many great attributes, I can't say. But the food wasn't that great. And Thanksgiving, as I said, as a kid, Thanksgiving was this huge extravaganza. But then later, and during Thanksgiving, she cooked, she had tons of food. But most of the other times it was pretty marginal. But what happened over the years, as we all got older, and we realized that the food wasn't that good, we kind of stopped. I mean, we continued to show up for Thanksgiving, and literally I'd show up every year for probably until my 50s. Even later, actually, but for Thanksgiving and Christmas. And as she got older, she got less enthused about cooking, I think, and the Thanksgiving dinners would become less and less and less and less over the years, until it ended up that she'd spend all day cooking in the kitchen, and it would be a little bowl of mashed potatoes and a 5 or 7 pound turkey and some string beans, and she would go to the store and buy a bunch of pies and buy a bunch of ice cream, and we would have a great time. Of course, nobody would eat. And at that point, the entire neighborhood had grown up, and the entire neighborhood came into our house as they were growing up. And our house was the house where everybody hung out. My dad had a spigot that he got because he was an appliance dealer, and he got a spigot, and he had 3 spigots on this kind of refrigeration unit. That one of them did orange juice, not orange juice, but orange aid or something like that. The next one had root beer, and the next one had Coke. Well, actually, it wasn't orange juice, it was 7-Up. 7-Up, root beer, and Coke. And that was in the garage. Anybody in the neighborhood could pour themselves a nice little drink and drink it as much as they wanted. And he kept supplying the tanks, They were very generous people. As I said, we got to the end. My mom had a little small turkey, a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and literally there'd be 25, 30 people there, and there'd be food left over at the end. And my mom could never figure it out, and I realized that what we all did is we ate before we showed up. But it was a grand thing, and it happened every year, and I miss that. This is Nick Colyer checking out.